If you wanted food to last through a depression winter, you bottled August and boiled the lid until it popped. That was the difference between a full belly and starvation. Welcome back. I'm the Archive. I've been reading the pantry ledgers and extension bulletins for decades. Today, we're ripping into the 1930s method that let families preserve almost anything in a glass jar. And I'll show you the one non-negotiable thing, the acid rule, that meant the difference between sustenance and poisoning. The grocery store you take for granted didn't exist for millions in the 1930s. Money evaporated. Shelves were empty or out of reach. A peach tree could groan with fruit in August, and by January that fruit was only a memory, unless you'd done the hard work of capturing it. The real problem was twofold. Seasonal abundance had to be stretched across months of scarcity, and the process needed to be safe. Food that sat on a shelf for months could rot, ferment, or, worst of all, harbour botulism, a silent, deadly toxin that loves oxygen-free jars. Families needed a reliable, repeatable method that ordinary people could use at home with ordinary equipment to kill pathogens, seal food airtight, and keep it edible for months. The stakes were life and death, and mistakes were unforgiving. The solution that scaled in the 1930s was deceptively simple. The mason jar and a disciplined, standardized canning process taught by extension services, community canneries and government pamphlets. It wasn't a single invention so much as the organized scientific application of an existing tool. Glass jars with two-part lids, combined with an understanding of acidity, heat and sterilization. People learned to pick, peel, pack and process on a schedule with precise times and temperatures. They turned labour into security. A row of sealed jars on a pantry shelf became a family bank account, paying out calories and vitamins when money didn't. 3 simple physical facts do the heavy lifting. Heat kills microorganisms to a point, cooling creates a vacuum seal, and acidity prevents certain deadly bacteria from producing toxin. The typical workflow was sterilize jars, pack hot food into hot jars, leaving exact headspace, place flat lids with sealing compound, screw bands fingertip tight, process the jars in a rolling boil for the specified time, then remove and let cool. As the jars cooled, contents contracted and pulled the lid down. The sealing compound deformed to create an airtight vacuum. The satisfying pop or ping is the sound of that vacuum locking the lid in place. Get all those steps right and your jar stays sealed for months. But there's a catch. Boiling water at 212 degrees Celsius will kill most bacteria, yeasts and molds, but it won't reliably destroy bacterial spores like those of Clostridium botulinum in low-acid foods. Those spores can survive boiling and then germinate in the oxygen-free jar to produce botulinum toxin. The fundamental safety rule that saved countless lives in the 1930s was simple and absolute. High-acid foods are safe to process in a boiling water bath. Low-acid foods require a pressure canner capable of reaching temperatures above the boiling point of water. In practice, that meant fruit, most pickles, with vinegar, and properly acidified tomatoes could be processed in a water bath. Green beans, corn, meat and soups needed pressure canning or were simply not canned by cash-strapped households. The critical biological threshold is a pH of 4.6. Below that, botulism bacteria cannot produce toxin. Above it, the risk exists unless you use higher temperatures to destroy spores. This is the non-negotiable ingredient. Acid. For safe water bath canning, you either pick high-acid produce or add acid. Tomato recipes from that era and today instruct canners to add lemon juice or citric acid per jar because tomatoes sit near the borderline. Pickling is vinegar and vinegar is acid. That's why pickles are reliably water bath safe. The 1930s education campaigns hammered this point. If you're water bath canning, make sure the pH is below 4.6. No guesswork, no shortcuts. Most families didn't have industrial kettles or pressure canners. Fuel and metal were scarce, and a pressure canner was an expensive luxury. The social answer was the community cannery. Extension services, churches and local government set up canneries where people could bring produce. There were large vats, trained supervisors and a line of locals peeling, coring and packing. This was cooperative labour and cooperative science. Novices learned from experienced women, recipes were standardised and processing times were followed exactly. A canner's shelf of jars represented not just calories but distributed expertise. The community cannery also economised fuel and equipment. One big boil served many families. Canning in the 1930s was production work done in a hot, humid environment. Women worked assembly line style. One peeled, another cored, someone else filled jars, another ladled hot syrup or brine, and a final hand tightened bands. Jars had to be hot when filled to prevent breakage and to reduce thermal shock. Headspace mattered. Leave too much and the vacuum might be weak. Leave too little and food could bubble out and contaminate the sealing surface. Processing times were specific. Low-acid fruit might be processed 20 to 30 minutes. Jam and jellies had their procedures. Pickles had brine and processing specs. There was no room for a pinch or a little more. The government bulletins and extension packets insisted on exact measurements. It was exhausting and dangerous work. Kitchens became sweatboxes in summer. A missed scrub on a lid, a cracked jar, or an underprocessed batch could lead to spoilage. Botulism is invisible in taste and smell. A jar can look fine and still be lethal. People learned to inspect lids for bulging, listen for the pop, and watch for off-odours, but these were reactive checks. The real safety came from process discipline. Sugar, necessary for syrups and jams, was a precious commodity. Glass jars and lids were capital goods that families hoarded and reused. A cracked jar or a lost lid was a tangible loss. The labour cost was high, weeks of backbreaking work at the hottest time of year. Yet the payoff was months of secure food. The 1930s revival of canning was not just technology, it was public education. USDA bulletins, county extension agents, radio programs, and seed and jar companies published tested recipes and clear guidelines. The message was scientific and prescriptive. Follow the recipe, use tested times, don't wing it. That standardization saved lives by eliminating improvisation. The practice also built social capital. Neighbours helped each other, swapped jars, and shared space and labour. Food security was built at the intersection of household effort and community systems. Don't romanticize the shelf. The jars were bought with exhaustion and constant vigilance. Labour, humidity, slugging sugar, scrubbing lids. It was relentless. For many families, canning was also a forced labour of necessity. It wasn't optional leisure, but survival strategy. And failure could be catastrophic. A poor growing season, a late freeze, or an infection could undercut months of effort. Still, in the context of the Depression, jars full of fruit were not nostalgia. They were cashable assets and food security. The canning methods and the acid rule remain central to safe home preservation. The pressure canner, once rare, is now common. Today's canners can safely process low-acid foods, but the core lessons from the 1930s still apply. Standardize processes, test and follow recipes, respect biological thresholds, and value community knowledge. Modern homesteading and food resilience movements are updated descendants of those depression practices. The jars, the seals, the ping, they're the same. The difference is more knowledge and safer equipment, but the basic human logic is unchanged. Capture the season, process with care, and store. Practical tips born from that era, readable, punchy, and old man tested. Use tested recipes. Don't improvise with canning times or acidity. For water bath canning, treat anything non-fruit as suspect unless you pressure can it. Add lemon juice or citric acid to borderline items like tomatoes exactly as specified. Reuse jars and bans, but replace flat lids each season. The sealing compound wears out. Headspace matters. Follow the chart. Jam, jelly, pickles and whole fruit all have different specs. When in doubt, heat higher. Pressure canning destroys spores. Don't skip it for low-acid foods. Share work. Community canneries and cooperative packing reduce labour and error. People in the 1930s learned to listen for the click of a lid as if it were coin in a safe. That pop meant the vacuum formed. It meant the jar was sealed and the year's labour was banked. That sound carried real comfort. For those families, the pantry was a psychological fortress as much as it was food storage. The 1930s method to preserve anything was not magic. It was applied science, discipline and community coordination. The one non-negotiable ingredient was understanding acidity and its role in preventing botulism when using a water bath. Beyond that, sterilization, correct processing times, and good technique made a pantry reliable. The jars on the shelf were a hedge against poverty, a small sovereign reserve held at home. That lesson, turn summer into winter, knowledge into security, is the hard, useful truth this history keeps handing forward.